Okay, in this video, I'm going to go over very quickly how to make light bulbs inside of Renderman. So I have these two objects here, and just in the 3D scene, the way that they look is I have essentially an outer mesh and then an inner geometry on both of them. So same thing with this one. They're just single-sided meshes, so they don't have interior walls to them. So this is a closed object though. So if you put glass on it, it will refract, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So let's come back over here. So I currently have a render going without any lights on. And so I just have some materials on both of these. So we'll take a look at this one first. So this one over here, I have this bulb mesh, right? And then inside of it, I have this mesh right here, which I called a sphere filament. I kept it low poly, so this is just a sphere I created, and the lower the poly, probably the faster it performs. And then in order to get this to be a light source, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Pixar Mesh Light. So this is one way we can make an object look like it's emitting light. So we do this. And so what that does is when we come here, you can see in the render that it's clearly visible, right? So you can see it's visible right there, and we have our light settings, and it's attached this Pixar black shader to the object. So this is the shader that the object has, is Pixar black, and here's its shader group. And you can see connected to both of them is this a light. So this is what Renderman lights come in and look like inside of the Hypershade. And so you can see it's connected to both of these. You have this area shader. So coming in here, if I look at this, it has the same settings as your typical light source. And so, as I increase the exposure, like this object is starting to emit more and more light, just like exposure settings happen on a regular light source. And so if I click on enable temperature, I can get temperature controls to essentially work with the Kelvin red, orange, blue, white light ramping that normal light sources are normally measured by. And we have some other settings like enabling shadows. One thing that you might notice is in this case it's fine, but if you we'll go ahead and put our glass on it. So let's go ahead and show our glass. So you'll see there's almost like a void there. There's almost like a black hole. So really quickly, let's go ahead and take a look at this glass. So here's my glass material. I'm just going to press 2 to compress that so it's not taking up so much space. So this is my glass shader that's on the outside mesh. And here I just have my basic glass settings. I turned off diffuse, made sure there's no specular, and I turned refraction and reflection gain up to 1. By default, it's going to be something like this, and your roughness is probably going to be -1, and your roughness is going to be something like this. And so you'll notice when you see that filament that's in there, right, that same one that we're seeing here, it's showing up as black. And that's because by default, for some reason, the light source is doesn't have visible and refraction turned on. If I turn that on, now I can see that object in there. Okay, so this works pretty well, but the problem is that this is a really thick glass. This is treating it almost like it's like a giant solid piece of glass rather than a thin-walled piece of glass with an object inside of it. So one thing we might want to do, and this will give a different look, so I do this artistically personally. If you click on thin, what that's going to do is it's going to treat this object as if it's a thin mesh and it has like a small interior wall rather than, a big solid object. So I enabled thin. You don't have to enable thin, and there's some advantages and disadvantages to it. The disadvantages is one, it can be a look that you don't like, but two, it can also increase your render times, right? Calculating refraction through the material is, adds computation to your render time. So if I don't have thin on, then I have a roughness setting for the light coming through and the light reflecting off, right? So this one right here is affecting the light reflecting off, and this one's light coming through. By default, this affects both, right? So if I increase this, the light reflecting off and the light coming through is being blurred and being rougher. And that's because it's set to -1. But you'll see when you hover over this, it says if it's negative, then this setting affects both refraction and reflection. So if I bring this above 0, then I can control that. So I can have sharp, glossy reflections on the outside, but the light coming through can be roughened up, kind of like ice or like a frosted glass, right? So that's one look. And then, but then when we come over down to thin, what happens is refraction is no longer happening, so refraction roughness doesn't change anything. So now we would use our roughness settings in order to change how blurry the light is coming through or how diffused it becomes. So one thing I want to bring to attention is this is a really simple setup, and there's another light source in here. There's a dome light just to add a little gentle fill. But it's pretty noisy, right? So mesh lights and turning objects into light sources and pushing them through objects like this can be really, really noisy. So it takes some finagling and understanding to try to optimize that, but it does give good results, visual results, right? It's a little bit more physically accurate. One other thing besides glass that I'm going to show is another option you can do is we'll come over here to, and I might restart that render. Huh, okay. Shouldn't be showing, but that's okay. Yeah, it should be blocking that light, but I wonder if it doesn't matter. Okay, so another setting that we could do is if you come over here to diffuse, oh, I know why. It's because my light source isn't, or my bulb, I turned it off of casting shadows in my render stats. So I came over here to render stats, and you can click on cast shadows. You'll see it's still really noisy because it's still, that light source still exists and it's still trying to calculate. So we're still getting a lot of noise. But anyways, I was doing that just to make my renders a little easier. But let's go ahead and go back to that shader. So I'm going to come over to the clear glass. Another setting you can do is you can come over here to diffuse, go under advanced and turn on double-sided, and then we'll just turn up this diffuse gain. So this is like a kind of like a version of glass. It's another way you can make an object translucent and let light travel through. It might be a little bit more cost effective, so it might be a little bit cheaper. It's a little weird to use, and because you can see it's still on even though gain is for the diffuse is turned off. But it is something that is, you know, possible, and you could play around with and see if you like that. So that's the basic setup for if you want to have like a mesh light. And so I have that actually setting over here as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this other one. So this other one has also a filament inside of it. And I'm going to make that a light source. And let's go ahead and go over to here. And we're going to go to red glass. And I'm going to just go ahead and add that mesh light to this. So we're just going to add that here, grab both of these, input, output. All right, and then we're just going to go press 2, organize these a little bit. Okay, so I went ahead and made that another mesh light. So we'll come back up here. And then if I turn this intensity down, so let's restart the render. It might not do anything, but that is something I generally recommend if you're making big changes and you're seeing like displacement or turning on and off or removing mesh lights, because that can help sometimes it just doesn't calculate correctly until you restart. So here I have the glass setting on my surface. So we have this red glass and I also have this displacement shader on it. Let's go ahead and hide that sphere filament for a second. Oops, not that one. Oh, my bad. Let me go ahead and undo this for a second. I made a mistake. Okay, here we are. The mistake I made was I attached the mesh light, or I made the outer mesh, the actual glass part, a mesh light instead of the filament inside. So I'm just going to come down here. We're probably going to just have to come in here and make the intense. First, we'll turn on visible and refraction. You can start to see it showing up, and then we just need to start cranking up the exposure to make it more visible. And you can see this has like an orange color, and that's actually because the glass itself has an orange color to it. So if I came over to this one right here is my red glass. And so you can see I have this red color to it. And so just changing that refraction color, to red gives the glass a red tint. And then I can further reinforce that by going to the light source and again enabling temperature and bringing the temperature down. And so you can see I'm getting a really warm color coming through. And I can just further play around with the light source and the glass color to try to get this to feel a different way. I'm going to go ahead and show you. So that's the mesh light method. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hide that filament, and we're going to go ahead and select that mesh. So we're going to go ahead and select it. And I'm going to come over and show you the glow method. So we're going to come over here and I'm going to assign this glow shader I had set up. Okay, so this glow shader, instead of creating an object and treating it like a light source, what it's doing is it's using the shader, the material itself, and the material is actually starting to emit light. Let's go ahead and hide this light source over here, so we're just looking at this one. So on this one, I'm just using a normal Pixar surface. I'm turning off my diffuse. I did leave on specular, but I don't have any glass. There's no glass on it. This is not see-through. This is solid, opaque. And then if you come down here, you can see I turned on this glow attribute and I attached something to its color. So if I just disconnected this for a second, so let's go ahead and just disconnect that, right? So I can just set this and change its color. If I set the values higher than 1, I can increase the exposure of this, right? So if I set this to like 50, you can see I'm actually emitting a lot more light and it's getting a lot brighter. It also has its own noise issues, of course, but that's something we can do. So if I attach this glow color, you can see I have this kind of complex setup. It's not that complex, but it may look complex. So what I'm doing for this one is if we just isolate these and look at these, that I'm using this setting right here, which is Pixar black body, and I'm using this right here, which is Pixar facing ratio. So Pixar black body, we'll start with this one and we'll just plug this one straight into there. So we're going to unsolo this. So what Pixar black body does is it uses exposure and color temperature values very similar to a light source. So you can come in here and you can actually change the temperature of the light source, right? And you can increase and decrease the exposure of the light. Oh, and I just realized I might have, oh yeah, I made a mistake before. Okay, cool. So yeah, so that's pretty cool. I like using that one if I'm using natural light sources. So we're just going to, I think I had it at 4. What I'm going to do is we'll go ahead and take a look at the Pixar facing ratio. So Pixar facing ratio, let's go ahead and replug this all in. So Pixar facing ratio is essentially going to return a black and white mask based on if the object is let's see how to describe it. Okay, so what it's going to do is it's going to return a black and white map based on if the surface is pointing towards the camera or turning away from the camera. I pushed up the game, but you can kind of see this a little bit better if I bring this down. So if you're familiar with the Fresnel effect, this is essentially kind of the same concept, right? Where as the surface turns towards the camera, the viewer, it has a certain value, and as it turns away, it has a different value. And I inverted it, but this is like the default setting. And as you decrease and increase this gamma setting, it's changing the spread from the sides, whether it's spreading out towards the sides or removing from the sides. And so I'm just inverting that and pushing this up a little bit. And so I'm just using this actually as a mask so that I can make this feel like something's glowing from the inside. So this is something that can be really helpful if you, and I'm just going to plug this straight into the glow color. This can be really helpful if you want to feel like something has a core to it. It's a bit of a cheat, but it works really well with small objects. So if I go ahead and unsolo this, and so I'm going to come in here with this gamma and just keep cranking it up. And you can see I'm starting to lose some of that light source on the edges. And all I'm really doing here, let's pull this one down out of the way, is I have my black body, my Pixar black body is feeding into the bottom color. And then the top color is just black, so it's setting the value to 0. And then this Pixar facing ratio I'm just using as a mask for the top value. So if we take a look at it, well, it looks just like what's coming out. So this gives you like, it kind of gives this feeling like it's a hot core, almost like a lightsaber or a neon light. But that makes it so it's not flat, right? So it's not just a flat constant shader value. So that can sometimes make something look a little bit more dimensional and realistic. You can also control this with ramps. So here I've created a ramp and we'll go ahead and plug this into the glow color now. So in this case, I'm just using a ramp that has, like a top up and down based on the UV's black to white shader, right? So I'm just doing this. And then I'm just multiplying that on top. So I'm just going ahead and again, I have black on top. Oh, in this case, I'm not multiplying. I'm just setting it to normal. That one's I'm multiplying, though it doesn't really matter. So I have it normal, and then it's just plugging into the top alpha. So this is just essentially wherever this is white, it's going to show black, and wherever it's black, it's going to show whatever's coming out of this right here. So then I can just, again, playing around with this will change that distribution and shape. And so that's just like a fun little feature that you could do if you wanted to make it look a little bit more like there's a light source down here pushing up there. And you could also, instead of doing the Pixar black body, I could just come up here and choose a bottom color. So if I wanted to do like a dark red, and again, like I said, you can push this further. So let's do 40, right? So it's now pushing a lot of light. Or you could do a ramp. So if we do Pixar ramp at the bottom, you can have this as a color. One thing I didn't mention, but I should mention, is I am turning off clamp output, which is a default for some nodes. When you have clamp output turned on, you can't have any values leaving it that are higher than 1. But when you're doing this glow color thing, you want values that are higher than 1 a lot of the time. So it emits light and it turns up the exposure. So if you're ever feeding things through nodes like these and your values aren't getting high enough or changing once you get past 1, just make sure none of your nodes are clamping the output. So anyways, and the same thing with this here, you can see it has a clamp output, but it's turned off by default, which is nice. So in this case, I'll go ahead and plug this into the bottom color. So by default, it's a white to black, and we're going to make it a T ramp, so it's going up to down. And then in this case, what I can do is I'm going to go ahead and grab my red color, and again, we'll set this to 40. Okay, and then this one right here, we'll grab this one, and we'll just grab the same color, and then we can dial down the intensity, or maybe I can make the bottom color, so this bottom color down here, maybe I can make this a little bit more yellow, right? So I can go ahead and change the color of it, right? So that gives you a little bit more options if you don't want to work with A, realistic colors, or B, you just want a little bit more control. You can add other colors in there. I don't know why you would want to do that, but it gives you that option and you can do that. So anyways, so that's just 2 different ways that we can do light sources like light bulbs inside of Renderman. So this one is using an object inside of it that is turned into a light source by clicking on mesh light. And then the other one is turning the surface of the outer piece into a light source using the glow attribute in a Pixar surface shader. So hope this helps.